Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Teach MA Dude coming to you with another exciting video. And I'm trying a little new thing this time. We're going to make it a little bit more video oriented, but I am trying out this cool new Zoom avatar feature. So we'll see how that goes. Today's video is going to be all about what I call the triangle of accountability. And the triangle points in short are teachers, students, and parents. And in reality, every other role is more or less designed to support one of these roles. So, for example, administrators, guidance counselors, school adjustment counselors, those kinds of roles are all meant to support one of these roles in the triangle of responsibility or accountability, however you want to put it. And really, I call it the triangle of accountability or the triangle of responsibility because without it, the essential learning that students need to succeed is just simply not going to happen. And that's because all three of these pieces have to work together in unison to make things successful. Okay. And so, I think many teachers out there have started to feel like it's more becoming like a single point of responsibility, where the teacher is the one who's really feeling that they are accountable for all of the learning. And the student and the parent, when they don't show up to do what's required of them, are not being held accountable at the same level. And I feel, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, it's not meant to be my employer's opinion or really anyone else's opinion. I do feel that that's true. I've made videos recently about, the idea that people want to provide free lunches for everyone. And while I think it is important that people be able to have a school meal, I think it's an example of how we're actually taking things off parents' plate, but we're not actually expecting them to do anything more for it. I think similarly, this idea of doing things like in my district, pushing back school start times so that students can get more sleep, which I think is again important, but nothing is being done to counteract that, or nothing is being asked of students. And so really, in my opinion, the triangle of accountability or the triangle of responsibility really falls on the teacher and becomes a single point. And as a single point, nothing can truly succeed. And really, all that happens is things break down. When you think about it, the student is the one that really needs to learn. Everyone needs to work together to make that happen. So I'm going to talk about in brief, what does each part of the triangle need to do to achieve success? So to begin, the teacher is the first point, and the teacher's job is to ultimately ensure the education of the student. To do that, what the teacher needs to do is the teacher needs to ensure that they're delivering lessons to the students, and those lessons are at grade level. They're challenging to the students at an appropriate level. They're adjusting their instruction to what the student needs. They're using data to kind of guide where to go next. And in general, they're doing things when students are kind of disengaging to work with them one-on-one or in a whole class environment to really help move everything forward. They're regularly assessing students to see if they're learning and to adjust their own practice to really kind of cater it to the students. And I think, in my opinion, that is what is being done by most teachers that I happen to see, right? So the teacher is really that instructional, person who's guiding the instruction and, facilitating the instruction and helping students get to where they need to be. All right, the student's responsibility is they need to show up to the class on time, ready to learn. They need to be able to take on whatever the teacher gives them. They need to try their best in doing so, and they need to be vocal advocates either through another adult or ideally directly to the teacher about what they need to be successful. They need to be respectful. They need to treat people with dignity. They need to, if they've got a question, they need to remember everyone's on their side. So this is not an excuse to be rude to themselves to others, to the teacher, to any other adults in the room. There's no excusing for, damaging property, whether that be their own, the teachers, the schools. There's no excuses for that. And, they need to be ready to take on whatever work is being thrown at them, because they need to be ready to believe that that work is essential to their success. Now, look, I understand that students in the past, right now, and I teach high school, students have gone through many, many teachers before me. And as part of my practice, I have to remember that students are coming into things thinking that, wow, I might have had a couple bad teachers in the past that haven't believed in me, and maybe I don't trust teachers anymore. Well, here's the reality. I've had a lot of difficult students in the past, right? So I, at the same time, have to go into it saying, look, I've had some students that have been challenging, but that's not going to prevent me from giving this current group of students in front of me what they need to succeed. I'm not going to judge anyone. I'm not going to react towards anyone based on, something that's happened in the past. It's not appropriate. And so as a teacher, I model that, and students need to reciprocate that by saying, look, Mr. X, Miss X, I've had some teachers in the past that have been really challenging. They haven't maybe been motivated. They haven't really taught me what I need to know. But look, this is an opportunity. This teacher is standing here, and unless this teacher is being rude, unless this teacher's really mailed it in, I need to give this teacher, my respect. I need to give this teacher my focus. I need to give my best into this class, into this activity, because the reality is, I'm going to step out of that perspective for a second. Look, in real life, we're hitting the ground running, right? If the boss says to do something, the boss needs that thing done. And so as schools and as teachers, we need to prepare students to take that on and to be ready for that, because all too often what I see, beyond that classroom is people saying, man, I really wish that was talked about in high school. Man, I really wish those expectations were set up in high school. Well, in my experience, they have been. But the problem is, without that triangle of accountability, or that triangle of responsibility, right, that's not really being actualized, right? So we have the teacher, we have the student, now the parent. And in my opinion, and again, this is my opinion, the parent is where things really fall apart a lot of the time. The parent has a simple responsibility, and I'm going to break this down. The parent's responsibility is to support the student and to support the teacher to ensure that the child is moving forward. Because look, the reality is that student is going to spend much of their day at school or at home. And the parent's responsibility is to ensure that the learning experiences that are being structured in the school, that are being designated to be brought home, are continuing at home. And their job is to ensure that, they're regularly checking on the student's progress. They're pushing the student to be, doing the things they need to be doing at home. And they're advocating for the student, and I think especially at an older age, encouraging that student to advocate for themselves. That's essential. And I think it's the parents' responsibility to, while they are, the child's advocate in a sense, they should be giving the teacher kind of, in a sense, the benefit of the doubt, in terms of, if this kid's coming home saying all kind of outlandish things, I think it's okay for that parent to say, okay, this doesn't sound right. This is upsetting. I don't like to see my kid upset. It's not good. But let's sit down. Let's maybe draft an email. Let's make a phone call. Let's respect the chain of command. So we're going to start with the teacher, and we're going to say, hey, what's going on? My child said this. Can you explain what's going on? And kind of take it from there, and show the teacher the respect and dignity given how much the teacher's putting in. Now, look, I understand that there's many reasons that parents are not able to follow through on this, right? Maybe parents work long hours. Maybe the parents have other siblings of that child that they need to take care of. Maybe the parents, it's only one parent because one of them is not in the picture. And again, in my experience, it's 90+% the dad that's not in the picture. The reality is, and I don't want to be insensitive, I'm sorry, but that does not excuse you or it does not diminish your responsibility as a parent to seeing that kid through to success. And I think that, again, we have to stop and think about what is truly expected of parents from schools and leaders. The answer is not very much, right? The parent is now in Massachusetts no longer required to prepare meals for the student. They really have a lot of say over those. They're allowed to make whatever decision they want for that student, right? They're not asked to ensure that they've got instructional materials at school each day. Much of the books, papers, supplies, schools even have things like binders, right? Backpacks if students really need them. So the parent doesn't really need to send their kid to school with supplies unless they want to have some additional stuff, right? Many schools now have technology that's supplied for the students, so they don't need to do things like purchase laptops or iPads or other kinds of, instructional technology. Really, all the parent has to do is ensure that the kid has an environment outside of school where they can continue to do what's going on inside of school at that teacher's direction. In my opinion, there really is not an excuse for when that school is calling or emailing for there to be no response. There doesn't have to be an immediate response. The parent I don't expect when I call, I don't expect the parent's going to necessarily pick up the phone. Look, we all have stuff we're doing, right? I work from maybe 7 to 2 or to 3, and I understand my workday and the parent's workday is going to overlap. The parent doesn't have to call me back right away. They don't have to pick up the phone, but they do have a responsibility to have accurate contact information on file with the school. And they do have the responsibility to return any calls or emails that the teacher sends. In my opinion, that's really the least that they can do, is be responsive to the school when that school calls and says, we have an issue that needs to be addressed regarding your child. Frankly, I think the parent should be glad that the school is taking so much interest to really want to be working with them one-on-one and really including them. Not all schools, not all teachers do that. Many individuals are just going to act as they're going to act. So I think that, the parent has, as an adult, a lot of responsibility for being responsive and for taking on those challenges that, the kid is going to present. And, without that point, I think the parent really undermines what's going on in the school, because the teacher can only set so much expectations. But the reality is that parent is going to be with the teacher year after year, right? From kindergarten through 12th grade, it is most likely, that parent is going to be constant in that child's life. The child will have many, many different teachers. I've had situations where I've been the math teacher for a student 2 or 3 out of 4 years in high school, but that's a rarity. And regardless, the parent has been there for all 4 years throughout all of the classes. And the issue is when the parent does not have structure, when the parent does not have discipline, when the parent does not support the teacher at home, then it's not very easy for us to be able to do things within the classroom to hold the kid accountable. The same is true of administration, right? If I don't believe that an administrator is going to back me on a certain, intervention, then for me, it kind of dampens my ability to roll that intervention out. So I think, again, there are 3 elements of this triangle of responsibility or accountability. The teacher, who has to, design the lessons and implement the lessons and bring the learning to life. The student, who's responsible for the learning, because that's really what they're there for. They're there to learn. They're there to grow. Not much is asked of them. And unfortunately, in the past 2 years with certain global events, I feel that they've been doing less and less and been given more and more. That's a problem. That's preventing things from moving forward in many cases, again, in my opinion. And finally, we have the parent, whose job it is to support the child and ensure their growth. And again, I understand that I grew up in very privileged circumstances, and unfortunately, it's a privilege to grow up with 2 parents now. That's a problem in our society that I believe needs to be addressed. Everyone should be able to grow up, and it doesn't matter about the gender, it doesn't matter about the sexual orientation. Everyone should be able to grow up with two adults that are loving and nurturing in their house, and things like childcare, income, etc., are not the responsibility of the child. It is not that child's responsibility to ensure there's enough income in the household. They should not have to work so your household can have enough income. That is the adult's responsibility. And when you put that on the child, the issue is that that child now is losing out on opportunities to gain additional educational enrichment that the students without those responsibilities are engaging in. For all of those who want to talk about equity, the reality is that as long as those structures remain, that's the way it's going to be. Look, the reality is, if you want to say we're going to change homework rules because a couple kids have to work to make money for the family, the reality is the parents of the students that are not in that situation will see that there's not enough challenge, and they will use those resources to provide the challenge. Similarly, babysitting, not the child's responsibility, especially if the babysitting interferes their ability to be at school. When I was a student teacher, I had a young woman who was almost always late to school. Why? Because her mother worked overnight, and it was the child's responsibility to watch her younger sister. The father was not in the picture. Other supportive adults were not in the picture. And yet that student had to have her education jeopardized by not being able to be at school. She had to risk discipline from individuals at school, the adults, and she had to have her learning disrupted because the parent decided that it was appropriate for that child to become a babysitter. Childcare is not the responsibility of siblings, particularly when it interferes with their education. Look, as a teenager, I had to watch my brother after school, and that was a reality. I had to be there to make sure that everything was okay. He wasn't old enough to stay home alone. My parents didn't have any kind of childcare at the time, but that did not interfere with my responsibilities to my learning. That is the key factor. So the parent not only has to ensure consistency and continuity at home, but it is that parent's responsibility to ensure that nothing interferes with the student's responsibility to learn and grow. This is an essential time. The teenage years and such is an essential time when students are developing important skills, important competencies. They're developing their skills in writing, in reading, in math, in social skills, in time management skills, in self-advocacy skills. And when you kind of shift the paradigm on them and prevent them from doing that, that's preventing them from learning and growing. And in my opinion, while I understand that there might be responsibilities to the household and to other children, the child did not create those children. The child did not create the financial situation in the household. It is not the child's responsibility to do things to mitigate the decisions that you as a parent have made. And similarly, it is not fair to ask them to not be able to do the things they need to do to grow at the expense of another child, right? So that is, the older sibling should not have to have their learning and their growing and their thriving and their development jeopardized at the cost of the younger child, because the younger child certainly won't have to have their, any of that disrupted, right? Look, I understand that there's a lot going on in society right now. And I think that, to be honest, there are a lot of structures being put in place, childcare structures, income, benefits and things like that. And my concern is that there are many children who grow up in environments where no matter how much that parent is not able to do what they're supposed to do as a parent, society falls back and says, it's okay because someone else will do it. And this is part of the fear to fail, that we see in schools, right? As I've talked about in a previous video, the fact that we're afraid to let students fail is actually harming them. It's preventing them from being able to achieve the success that they would by learning from failure. And I think a similar thing is playing out with parents. We have leaders who don't have the courage to put parents in a position where, you made a difficult decision and now you're going to have to struggle through that decision, as I think it used to be previously. And I think the consequence is kids grow up in households where they see, hey, my parent doesn't need to do what they need to do. They can put it on me. And you know what? Society will step back and say, that's okay. Because rather than letting that parent fail, we're going to do whatever we can do to help them succeed. We won't teach the parent to fish. We'll just give them the fish. And if I was a kid growing up in that kind of environment, I would say, well, when it's my turn, why not do the same thing? Because society has shown that it doesn't have the courage to have me struggle and have me say, you know what I did was the wrong decision, and now I'm going to have to live with that. Instead, what society will say is, how can we help you get through it? What can we do to help? Now, look, if kind, good Samaritans want to throw in their skills, their labor, their resources, that's one thing. But the reality is, most of those resources are coming from the government. In Massachusetts, it's expected that about $160 to $170 million is going to be invested to ensure that all students have access to free lunch, even though, by the own government's estimates, about 1 in 2 students can already afford it. And we are asking nothing from teachers. For example, in Massachusetts, if you change your address, you're required to inform the DMV within 30 days of that address. But yet, if you change your phone number, you don't even need to keep that phone number up to date with your child's school. Why don't we ask that parents be required to have up-to-date contact information at all times? And to say, when perhaps that child goes to get picked up, if we're calling and we're not getting responses, to sit that parent down and say, that's not acceptable. We are taking off your plate a number of things. We are asking from you very little. We will not allow you to fail to meet up to our expectations of parents. The reality is, as I prepare to look at the next year at my current school, we have expectations for students, that students will be checking their homework through the online system every day. We have expectations for parents as well that are similar. But unless we take measures to have the, courage to hold parents and students to high expectations, because Lord knows we hold the teachers to high expectations, right? Unless we have the courage to hold those students and those teachers and the parents all to high expectations, then it becomes one single point of accountability or responsibility. And that point is the teacher. Because when the parent breaks out, the student looks to that parent, the student breaks out, unless that student is hyper motivated. And frankly, those are not the students that we're concerned about. Frankly, those students are going to do just fine. But the students we do worry about, the minute that parent breaks out of the cycle, there goes the student. If the student doesn't think there's going to be any accountability when that teacher calls, well, what does I'm going to call home mean anymore? It should mean something. And unless, again, all 3 pieces of that triangle come together, not just the teacher and the parent, but the teacher, the parent, and the student, we're pushing kids into the real world who are simply not ready, who simply don't have not just the skills of the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also they don't have the soft skills needed to be a functional adult. I can tell you that as a high school teacher, a college teacher, and someone who is both at the same time. But look, I'm sure that there's something I've missed, and I'd really love to keep this conversation going. So, hey, look, if there was something that, you think you can contribute, please drop that in the comments. Please like and subscribe, because this is important to me. Getting my perspective out and having these important conversations is what really has motivated me on this channel. Guys, thanks so much for watching. This has been another episode of Teach MA Dude, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.